wooden spoon in your mouth. That we dug it out from the very beginning, and I remember in the very, very beginning, we had only that one old little truck.
And honey, in the very beginning, you weren't there.
That's also true. Okay, take it away.
Well, I can say this after what Mary just shared with you. It's taken $15 million of laboratory equipment to replace me. So my nose came with me. It didn't cost me anything. But before I start, I would like to just acknowledge all of you for your commitments in Young Living, for taking this time out of your family schedule to come and be here with us and share in your spirit and your passion and your love, and to multiply that and take it back home to your families and friends and members in your organization. It's been quite a journey, and I am very grateful to have had the opportunity to be here this morning. Last weekend when you had the conference, I was in Alaska, prepping and getting ready for next year. And so I was really excited when I had the opportunity to come and listen to my son. He didn't get his voice from me because I never lost any of it. And of course his talent comes from his mother, and it's a great joy to have three in the family that can sing, and I get to be the listener, and the one to sit back and be the recipient of their beautiful talent. And it's a great time. So with that, I'll jump in and share a little bit of the past. How many of you have never heard the past? How many of you really don't want to? You'd rather hear about the future? Well, here's the thing. Is the past is what builds you. It's the past that molded your character. It's the past that developed your personality. It's the past that created the path that you walk on today. So even though we talk about not living in the past is such a huge part of who we are. And I've often said, never forget where you came from. You know, many of us, and I see it so much in life, that climb the ladder and come into an influence and abundance and wealth, and all of a sudden they're a different person. And they forget who they were, where they came from, and what created them and what molded them to be what they became. And folks, as you're out there building your organization and rising to abundance and wealth and prosperity in every way of your life, never forget where you came from. Because there's nothing more powerful than having wealth and abundance and being humble and prudent at the same time. And I was asked last week, I believe it was, Gary, what does it feel like to be a billionaire? And I said, you know, I get up in the morning, I shower the same, I shave the same, I put my pants on the same as I did when I had nothing. And I said, it means nothing to me except I can do more for people. That I have measured my self-worth with. I measure my self-worth with accomplishment and what I can do to help others. And from the day in 1975 when I felt my toe move under the sheet after 2 years of being bedfast, and I screamed with excitement and my mother and father came running down the hall and thinking something was really wrong. And I said, Mom, Dad, I felt my chill move against the blanket. And I pulled the blanket back, and my dad pulled it off my foot, and I tried to move my toe, and it wouldn't move. And Dad said, oh son, you're just imagining. You're probably just having a dream. And from that time, walking without crutches that my sister took a picture of years later, and throwing the walker away, and being able to walk without assistance was 13 years. There were a lot of hard times, a lot of difficult times. This past almost 2 years now has been another real challenge in my life. It started in November 2009 when I was in the Peruvian jungle and looking for plants for all of you to make oil. And some of you know that while I was in Ecuador, I discovered 48 aromatic plants that had never been discovered before and never been distilled before. I found 8 in the jungles in Peru that had never been distilled or analyzed before. But while I was deep in the jungle, I took a motorboat down the Amazon River from Iquitos near the Brazilian, Peruvian, Ecuador, Colombia border, and then went up a side tributary in a little boat they call a peka for a half a day, and then embarked into the jungle with a shaman looking for plants, and that night I stayed in their village and slept in a grass hut. And I was bit during the night on my side, just under my arm, that left quite a scar there. And I was undiagnosed for 7 years, not knowing what it was. Originally, I was diagnosed with malaria, tuberculosis, Lyme disease, dengue, Addison's. I was quarantined at the University of Utah Hospital January 2010. For 7 days, I was put under house arrest because I tried to leave the hospital. And I kept telling them, no, I didn't have any of these diseases, and they wouldn't listen to me. They were convinced I did, following all the testing back, and no, it wasn't. Finally, the Rochester Center of Disease Control from Rochester sent back the final report saying unknown virus. But from that time, I started developing a cough, and I started having problems, and I didn't know what it was, because I wasn't able to run the distance I could run. I couldn't hike the way I hiked before. I would get winded early, and I talked to a couple of my doctor friends, and they said, well, after all, Gary, look at your age. And that just made me mad. What the heck does age have to do with anything? And so I just continued doing what I did. But when I came out of the jungle in Peru, I had a miniature volcano on my side that was just oozing liquid. And it was extremely painful. But I had a schedule. I got back to Ecuador, I was there 4 days, and then I had to be in France for continuing education on GC and mass spectrometry. And then I went from there to the farm, and then I went from there to Muscat, to Salalah, to our farm there and our operation, and then from there to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, where I gave a presentation at the university, and then I traveled throughout Ethiopia looking and gathering samples of the different specimens of frankincense. And while I was there, I started running a fever, and it went up to 105.2. And finally, after the second day, when it wouldn't break from laying in ice water at night in the hotel room and it just getting more intense, I called Mary and I said, you better get me home, something's wrong. So she did, and it was the air traffic control strike. Just happened to happen that precise time. I got from Addis Ababa to Cairo, I sat there for 10 hours, and they got me to Tel Aviv. I sat there for another 8 hours, and they got me to Madrid, and I sat there for 12 hours before getting out to Guayaquil. all the time running a fever of 105.2 and 3, and pretending to feel like $1 million to walk on the plane so they wouldn't suspect something was wrong and wouldn't let me board the plane. So I got back home to Ecuador, Guayaquil, where we were living at that time. I was building the farm and the school, and I gave myself a couple of IVs, felt better, came home for Christmas, went up to the winter harvest, and Jeff and Sabina was there.
Oh, yes, I remember that.
I was there 2 weeks. I came home for the weekend, laid down in bed and couldn't breathe. Set me in the recliner. Mary said, no, let's go find out what's wrong. And so that's why I went up to the University Hospital. Well, to make a long story short, a year ago, August the 4th, I was diagnosed at the MD Anderson Hospital with Chagas disease. It's fatal. It kills 10,000 people every year, and only those who are caught within 24 to 48 hours and given antibiotics, very strong antibiotics, may survive. But because I got out of the jungle and I was doing thieves the whole time I was there, it took me 3 days to get back out of Peru to Ecuador, and I was just drinking thieves until I emptied 2 bottles of it. And then I had my spray, and I used that till I got back to Ecuador. And that's what I did while I was traveling. And I thought it was okay until the fever came up. But in the meantime, what that virus does, it eats the internal organs. And it ate a hole through my heart, it ate scars on the heart muscle, it ate lung lining and other organ tissues. And it has been quite a battle since. I've got 2 implants in my chest. I've had 4 surgeries in the last 2 months, and 2 in my spine because I lost my oxygen one morning and fell over top of the corner of the tub and hit the floor and shattered 2 vertebrae in my spine. And so it's been a bit of a challenge. In the meantime, I raced dogs in Alaska last winter. I'll never forget Mary. It was after Christmas last year, and I think a day or 2 after Christmas, and I turned over to her in the morning and I said, honey, I want to go to Alaska and race dogs. And she says, have you lost your flippin' mind? And I said, well, maybe so, but I'm going to have to go to Alaska and try and find it. And she said, what on earth possessed you to want to do that? And I said, it's been on my bucket list for over 40 years. When I lived in Fairbanks in 1970, the end of 75 through 77, the Iditarod had only was beginning its 3rd winter. And it was a frenzy. Fairbanks, you would go to the grocery store and there'd be 20 dog sleds, and maybe have 2 dogs, 4 dogs to the most, but all the women were going shopping with a dog sled instead of a car. You'd see 15, 20 dog sleds and maybe 1 or 2 cars at the shopping center, or at the grocery store. They would take their kids to the school on a dog sled. And I just thought it was fabulous, and I just said to myself, I want to do this. I want to do this. But folks, I made a mistake, and I'm going to tell you what that mistake was, so you don't do the same thing. I made the mistake of saying, I'm going to do this someday. And you know what? I haven't found a calendar yet that's got someday in it. If you want to do something, you say, I want to do this on January the 4th, 2010, 2020, 2017, whatever date, but put a date on it. And if you get to that date and things haven't worked out for you to do it, then move the dadgum date, for heaven's sakes. You got to cancel the You're in charge of your destiny, nobody else. So direct it. And the best way to direct it is with a pencil. Mary, I'm still trying to convince her to quit using a wooden pencil. It's the worst habit to have. And the reason why is if you use a wooden pencil, you turn it over and erase it. So you write a date down, and then you get close to it, and oh, it's not going to work, so you erase it. So nobody sees it. You put it in ink. Put it in ink if you're going to write your date. That's a commitment. You know, and if it's getting in your way and you pass that date, well, you can cross it out. You can use some white out. But put it in ink, because that has more energy. and more commitment. All right? So I made the mistake of saying someday. Well, last year I woke up and decided someday finally came. So Mary was not too happy with my decision, so I said, okay, we're going to do this in a very diplomatic way, a very correct way. We're going to put it to a vote. So sitting at the breakfast table, I said to Jacob and Joseph, I say, hey, son, what do you think if Dad went to Alaska and raced dogs? Dad, that's so cool. 3 against 1. What can she say? Huh? So see, it's all about how you handle things. And it's all about the presentation. And so I went off to Alaska with a hole in my heart, post-ventricular contractions, post-atrial contractions, pleural infusion, pulmonary hypertension, a myriad of problems. And you know what? That's why she said I was crazy. She said, honey, what if something happened? And I said, could you think of a better place for it to happen? I'm closer to God. And I'm in a beautiful country. I'm in his living room. But nothing's going to happen. I went up there knowing absolutely nothing about dog racing. I called Mitch, who we sponsored for several years, and I asked him, I said, if I come up, would you have time to take me out and see what I can do? And he said, sure. So I flew up on the 11th of January. He hooked up an 8 team of dogs, and I jumped on the sled, and I followed him, and we went out through the bush and came back. And then we went out that afternoon for a second little 10-mile jaunt. We came back, and I thought, geez, is this all there is to dog racing? And so at 2 o'clock Sunday morning, he says, Gary, let's go out and do a midnight run and see how you do in the dark. Fine. So we hitched up the dogs again, 10 this time, and we went for 20 miles. And he took me in a different place, different route, on a different trail in the bush, and he went around this real sharp corner. And I knew he planned it after that, because he knew that I needed an experience of rolling a dog sled. And boy, it rolled. But what he told me is, if you roll over on a dog sled, whatever you do, don't let go, because those dogs won't stop till they get back to the kennel. And it's a 20-mile walk back. And boy, I hung on. And I rolled, and I hung on, and they dragged me through the snow, through the little trees, until it piled up so much snow it stopped. That was okay, and I got up and I looked and I couldn't even see his light anywhere. I got my sled back up and we took off and got back to the kennel, and we were having breakfast that morning, and I said, well, Mitch, what do you think? He said, Gary, you're a natural born musher. I'm going to sign you up for a race. Oh, okay, no big deal. So I bought 8 dogs and brought them back home, and I borrowed a sled from a guy in Park City, and I made 5 runs at home. And in the 3rd run, I rolled again, and guess what? Broke 3 ribs. Oh, that was smart a little bit. So that weekend, I flew back to Alaska, and I got in my first race. And I'm number 28, going out the chute. And the lady in front of me is a 20-year veteran seasoned musher. I forget her name. And I'm watching her, and I'm thinking, all I got to do is do exactly what she does, and I'll be okay. I'm standing on the hunters, and I got a hold of my sled, and they got me anchored to a snowmobile, and I got 12 dogs out there, and they're just lunging at that line, and they're just excited, and they're ready to go. That's their passion, that's their destiny, it's their love to run. And I'm feeling a little bit nervous, because all these people that are in this race, they know what they're doing. And I'm standing there pretending like I know what I'm doing. And they pull the pin to release her from the snowmobile, and the dogs lunge, and she flips over. Oh, wow. And I was following her example. And she's a seasoned musher, and she rolled her sled right in the chute. And I can't do this. They'll laugh at me. And so they ease me into the chute, and I hear the announcer and calling my number and my name, and I'm getting tense and I'm hanging on. I can't roll this sled, I can't roll this sled. And they pull the pin, and and you can't imagine, except this little lady right here, the power that 12 dogs have. And I went through that chute and out and around the corners, and the trail came up over a road. And I'm trying to slow these dogs down, and I'm on the brake, and it's frozen hard, and there's already been 28 sleds ahead of me, and it's not slowing those dogs down. And you imagine what happens when you're going 110 miles an hour, and you come up like this over the berm of a road. No, it wasn't 110 miles an hour, but it felt like it. And when that sled went up over that berm, it never touched the road. It went clear over the road, and as I'm flying through the air, I'm thinking to myself, I can't crash now. And I hit, and I was still upright, and the dogs were just going. It was so exciting. What I didn't know is when I got to Freddy's check station 50 miles later, is that the guys were betting that I wouldn't make it halfway to the first check station. But the funny part that I have to share with you, I've got this GPS thing that my good friend Mark gave me, and John, actually, they set it up on my sled so I could pull it up and look at it. And it's, cold, and I'm wiping the frost off and looking at it. And I've been out there on this dog sled for hours and hours and hours, and going and going and going, and then I'd stop, give the dogs a little treat, and go and go and go again. And everybody that was in front of me had gone way out of sight, and I was out there all by myself, going through no man's land and bush that I never knew. And I'm wiping it to see how far I've gone. And it says 5.1. I've been out here all these hours and the sun is going down. I'm only gone 5.1 miles. And I'm getting frustrated. I'm getting nervous. I'm getting depressed because the sun's going down. It's starting to get a little dusk. And I'm only gone 5.1 miles. And I put it down and I'm going and I'm going and I'm going and around corners and I stop and I rest my dogs for a few minutes and I give them a snack, get back on the sled and I'm going and going and going. I pick it up and I wipe it off. I've gone 5.7. And at this rate, I'm never going to get to Freddy's. It's 52 miles away. And I was just frustrated as all get out. And I come over this hill and I see lights across the canyon. And I thought, that's impossible. There's lights over there. And I go down the big ravine and I come up out of the ravine and here's John Wett with his camera sitting there. And I just, wow, how can this be? I've only gone 5.7 miles and John can't be here unless he's at the check station. So when I pulled into the check station, and there's this big celebration, Mr. Young, you made it. And I'm trying to figure out why they're so excited I made it. I didn't know they were betting against me. And I pull in and stop, and everybody's rushing to try to assist the best they can. And I pick that thing up and look at it, it still says 5.7. It was my miles per hour.
Oh.
So folks, learn the lesson. Be real clear about your information you're getting. Okay? So anyway, it was an amazing experience. I completed the race. I had 2 goals. I'm not even a rookie. I'm not even good enough to be classified a rookie. I'm a greenie from down below, the lower 48. And we went down off this big hill, down in what they call Deep Creek. And the mushroom ahead of me came around the corner, and I'm watching him, and he didn't get his sled onto the bridge, and it jammed into the side of the bridge. The lead team was across the bridge, and of course when it jammed, it just snapped it like a bowstring, and 10 of the 12 dogs went in the river. And they're floating down, and here's the ice frozen solid across the river below. And I see this, and I can only imagine one thing. That sled is going to pull away from the bridge, and the whole thing is going into the river. The musher jumps off the sled and runs across the bridge, and he starts running down the river, a bank, to get to the lead team that's floating down the river, and he's in snow up to here, and he's just sludging, trying to get through the snow, and the team is floating, and the sled is coming around, pulling away from the bridge, and I just see it. And I set both of my snow hooks and jumped on when I ran, and I got 3 broken ribs. It just happened 4 days before this. And I grabbed the tow line, and I pulled, and I'm wanting to scream, and I'm wanting to let go. And the fear of those dogs going under that ice. And it doesn't matter how much it hurts. I can't let them get under that ice because it'll be all over. And I'm pulling and I'm pulling. And Patrick, this is the name of the mushroom, he's sludging through the snow and he finally got down to the bank. And as I pulled back and held him from floating anymore, stopped the sled from moving, he then was able to reach the lead team, pulled him up on the snowbank and walked up the bank. And then he pulled that way and I pulled this way and we lifted the other 8 dogs up on the bridge and got across. Patrick's a 20-year seasoned musher. And I'm saying to myself, he just put the team in the river. Oh my. And I got across that bridge. Well, I had an advantage because we were stopping, so I just grabbed my sled and I walked it, slid it around where I could get it onto the bridge and we went across. And I said to Patrick, I said, we get on the other side, I'll build a fire so we can dry the dogs out. And he said, Gary, don't worry about it. I said, what do you mean? They're soaking wet. They've been in that river. And he said, they're dogs. They're huskies. He said, we're just going to run. And he got off across and on the other side, he checked all the harness and everything was okay. We walked up and down. Then he took off and I took off behind him. And those dogs were just as happy as a, yeah, you were at the buffet. And they were shaking like that, and in just a few minutes, they were steaming. It was just amazing to see this. And it was around 10 below that night. And, you know, just nice, brisk evening. But we got to McLaren's, which was halfway, and pulled in there, and this was really funny. I'll share this with you, and then I'll get serious. I pull in, and the lady, her name was Jane, she comes up with her checkboard, clipboard, because they have to check you in, they have to look at the dogs, make sure the dogs are all okay, no one's hurt, no one's sick, and then they want to look at all your gear in your sled because you've got a mandatory things like snowshoes and an axe and a cooker and food and sleeping bag that are mandatory you carry on the sled. So they would check all of that out, make sure you got it all, that you didn't ditch it to lighten the load so you could go faster. And so as I pull up and she comes over, she says, Mr. Young, she says, how long have you been training for this race? Or how many years have you been training for this race? And I said, I haven't. She said, what do you mean? I said, this is the only 7th time I've been on a dog sled. And she dropped the clipboard in the snow. And she picked it up and she said, no, you're kidding me. And I said, oh, ask Mitch. I said, ask that guy, he knows. And she says, that's amazing. Can I ask you another question? I said, sure. Why did you pick the hardest race in Alaska to be your first one? And I said, well, they told me it was. And anyway, she chuckled and laughed, and she says, well, this is just amazing. She says, I understand you have problems at the Deep Creek Crossing. And I said, yeah. I says, the guy in front of me, his dog team went in the river. And she said, well, we had 3 other teams went in the river. And I said, well, it's a little bit rough crossing. And she says, are you going back? And I said, well, yeah, I have to go back to finish. She said, well, 4 other mushers where I scratched, they're not going back. I had 2 goals. 1 was to finish the race, and 2 was to take the same dogs home that I brought them. And I accomplished those 2 goals. The next part that was really exciting is when I came into the finishing line at 4:20 in the morning, 200 miles later. And I felt like a popsicle that had been taken out of the freezer. And I hadn't slept. You don't sleep. That's against the rules to sleep. You just get mummified. And I came around the turn. There were lights, there were people talking, there was excitement, and there was a lot of people. I didn't know who they were. They was there to greet me. And nobody. But in the crowd, I saw two people running up the chute line. And I recognized them, Jacob and Joseph. And in the background was this little woman that I couldn't really recognize, but I could tell by her watch because she was covered with so many clothes. Wow, my heart just was happening. Little things can mean a million to you. There wasn't nothing in the world that had more value to me at that moment than hearing my voice and my sweetheart at that finishing line at 4:20 in the morning at 12 below zero. And what a voice. And you know what? It was such an experience. I thought, wow, I can't stop here. So I jumped into another race and did 300 miles. And when I finished, come across that finishing line, it was daylight. That was a new experience. And when I came in across Big Lake to the finishing line at Willow, Jared was there, Janae was there, Matt was there, Lori from Canada was there, Mary was there, Joseph was there. Jacob didn't make it because he had school activities. But oh my goodness, what a celebration. So I share this with you in this, folks. You're never too old to do something that you shouldn't. You're never too old to try something you've never done before. And was I scared? Yeah, there was a couple of times I was dang scared. When those dogs went in the river was probably the scariest I can remember being in a long time. One, because I thought they were going to drown in that river. And two, I didn't know if I was going to get across that bridge. I didn't know what I was doing. And it was so fun because there were so many times I knew the dogs were talking to me. And I just realized later because my brain was frozen. But I'd be going through at nighttime. Oh my goodness. This is something that you need to understand. There's a lot of times you can't see where you're going. Okay? But that doesn't mean you quit. It doesn't mean you stop. It doesn't mean you turn around and go towards the light. Because sometimes going towards the darkness is your best light. And sometimes when things doesn't seem like it's going to work out for you, it's just because it's around the corner and you can't see it. And that was a big lesson because I'm going through those mountains and it's pitch black and there's nothing. And Jessie can testify that she ran the Iditarod 15 times. Okay? There's nothing blacker than being in a black spruce forest with no stars shining because it's overcast. It's so black you can't see the end of your nose even if it was 6 inches long. And you don't know where those dogs are going. And we come to a hill and my headlight shines out just to the lead team, 12 dogs. And that beyond that I can't see anything. And then we come to a hill and the dogs would disappear. And my stomach would go in my throat. Where are we going? What's on the other side that I cannot see? How many of you have thought while you're building your business, well, I can't really see where I'm going with this. I don't know what's going to be the outcome. Maybe I should go back and work at McDonald's, or maybe I should go back to my teaching job, or whatever it is. How many have felt you should go back? Only one honest person here today. Okay, many of you. Absolutely. I couldn't see where those dogs were going, and I learned something. I called it a 1-ear hill, and a 2-ear hill, and a 3-ear hill.
when the first dog would disappear like that, that was a 1 ear hill, it was steep. If it was 2 ears that disappeared gently, it was moderate hill. If it was 3 ears that disappeared slowly, it was a rolling hill. When I had 1 ear hills, I knew I better be on that brake and I better be trying to slow it down. And when I go over, those dogs would look back at me and laugh at me and say, yeah, let's see if we can lose him on this one. And they would just put the pedal to the metal, and off that mountain we would go. And I got my arms under the handlebar, and I'm standing with both feet on the drag brake trying to slow it down, and we're going around the trees and down the hill and around the trees. And I'm closing my eyes because I can't see anything anyway. And at that point you think, I'm going to die. That's okay. At least I've got dogs with me. But by the time they find me, my boots should still be around. So you think about the worst that can happen, you put it out of your mind, you expect for the very best, and you go for it. Okay? And you quit worrying about, is it dark, is there a turn, is there a hill, is there an uphill, is there a river, is there all this? There's always problems in life. Always problems in life. So you have to decide what you're going to focus on. Are you going to focus on building your business and success and sharing it with people and helping people's lives change? Or are you going to focus on a hill? Are you going to focus on the dark? Are you going to focus on the river that you might land in? No. You focus on where you want to go and where you want to be. And that's it. I set 2 goals and I accomplished them both on both races, back to back. And then the gal at the finishing line on the second race, she says, Mr. Young, there's not many people that run 2 races back to back, and certainly not a rookie. And I said, nobody told me. So see, you base your information on yourself, not what other people do. Okay? You just do it. And so my little 8-dog kennel is growing slightly. Anyway, Mary wanted me to talk about it. I don't know how much time I have left, but okay. So, well, I don't want to take time away from you all, and Jess is here to speak, and those of you who haven't heard Jesse, you're in for an amazing treat, I'll tell you. 15 minutes? Okay. So, I don't know, this thing isn't working, I guess. Oh, there it comes up. This is... Clint Walker. How did I get acquainted with Clint Walker, and how did he become a very personal friend? In 1985, he was a patient of mine. He had a...
Hey.
What?
Better be careful what you say.
You heard me. That's how we got acquainted. And that's quite all right. And he's still healthy. I just talked to him a couple months ago. We visit on the phone 2 or 3 times a year. He's a great mentor, a great friend. This is my life, and this is how I grew up, and that's what I love, and it's still my passion. I always had dogs growing up. We had stock dogs because we ran cattle, sheep, horses. So there was always a dog, but I never really developed a strong relationship with dogs after my 3rd dog was killed by a grizzly bear on our ranch in Canada, and so I kind of separated myself. This experience this past year healed some old scars and opened another dimension. And anyway, it's another story, but I was at a convention a few years ago in Texas. How many of you were there? Yeah, that was a great time, wasn't it? So how did I get into aromatics? It was when I had my practice in San Diego and a clinic in Mexico years ago. I was always looking for modalities for my patients. And a woman brought her sister to me from Zurich, Switzerland, and after we got her checked in,
we were sitting in my office, and she said, Mr. Young, what do you know about essential oils? And I said, oh, been there, done that, don't care. Because I had my first experience with essential oils in 1976, and they were perfume oils, but I didn't know that at that time. And so after I insulted her, and I was trying to figure out how to get the foot out of my mouth, she said, well, do you believe all herbs that you buy in the health food store are the same? I said, absolutely not. Because I had my own apothecary, and we would go out and gather herbs, and I made my own tinctures and my ointments and salves and everything back in those days. I bought very little. We made it. And she said, well, essential oils are the same way. She said, I have family here. She said, I come to the States periodically. She said, there are no essential oils sold in America. There are perfume oils. And so 10 days later, guess what? I was at the Medical University of Geneva, Switzerland, studying chemistry of essential oils. And from there, I went to Paris, France, and spent 4 days at the hospital with 2 medical doctors at the research they were doing on respiratory illness with essential oils, and that began my life. And I bought 13 liters, 13 oils, a liter each, and brought them home and began studying and doing research, and that's where it began. Oh, again, yes, Mary can't understand that I like this sort of thing. But I do. There's nothing like being in God's living room and being one in His creation. And that's why I love my horses and I love doing this. I've developed a new love for the dogs, and will continue that as well. The picture on the bottom far right is my father there on the horse, and that cabin behind him is a little 16 by 20 cabin with a dirt roof, and that's where I lived, and my sister, until I was about 4 years old. My dad built the big mansion straight above it there. It was 30 by 30 cabin, and we lived there until I left home and went to Canada homestead. And so that was my life. There's Nancy standing there in front of the old Chrysler, and my granddad, I'm standing there to the left, or to the right, with his hand on my shoulder. So we lived and grew up in a condition that people would consider poverty. In fact, when Nancy and I were in school, we were voted the second poorest family in the school. And when I was in my junior year in high school, I was voted by my classmates the least likely to succeed. Why? Because I didn't like school. Because my dad told me from the time I was a little boy, education will ruin a good man. I wanted to be a good man. I didn't want to be ruined. My dad never went past grade 9. That was a picture there when I was in and out of the wheelchair in my recovery point. The bottom picture down here with me putting hobbles on my horse, this was my homestead in Canada. The picture up the top right, that's some MRIs of my spine. You can see the vertebra and the neck on the left side. There's not much that's identifiable from the original accident in 1973. From the situation I had 2 months ago, it resulted in 2 surgeries. I only have 2 vertebrae in my spine that have not been broken, fractured, or crushed, and 16 ruptured discs. So when people complain about having a pain in the back, yeah, I've been there. This logging truck there was equipped with hand controls because I would not take welfare. I would feed my family. The painting on the far left, that's how I fed my family until I went back driving truck. So folks, it doesn't matter how tough life gets, it doesn't matter what life deals you. You have a choice. You either grab it, do something with it, or you just sit back and bellyache and moan and let people feel sorry for you for a while. That gets old quick. In my clinic in Mexico, the apothecary that I built, there's Clint Walker singing with Donna Riley, another patient. Some of you know Donna. Beautiful lady, but I would take my patients on weekends that were ambulatory, and we'd go into the deserts in Mexico or California and gather plants and herbs, and then I had other people shipping them to me, and we'd grind them up and we'd dehydrate them and dry them and whatever, and that's where I made Vitagreen, that's where I made Comfortone, that's where I made Thyromin, that's where I made ICP. All of the original supplements, I made them here for my patients. Dr. Bernard Jensen, his wife was a patient of mine, and we became very good friends through those years. This is when I started Young Living in actually this was taken in 91, I believe. No, 1989. There's Eldon, Nettle, and Nancy there, and their sponsor, Loretta Bone Bright. You know, this just was a beautiful time. This top picture was taken in Edmonton, Canada. This is when I took the first group of distributors, 1992, to our farm in France. At that time, I leased it in 1991, and we bought it in 1996. The first American-owned farm in France. And I think we still are today. So, where do you start at? You have to start with a dream. And you have to believe in yourself enough to build on your dream. And folks, I can't tell you how many times when I was doing this, people would tell me that I was crazy. I was a snake oil salesman. I was a witch doctor. I was a voodoo doctor. I was everything but a white man. You know, and yeah, it hurt. I can't lie to you and tell you it didn't hurt to be called names and be slandered. It still hurts. But you can't let that be your focus. You can't have your family or anybody telling you cannot be a Royal Crown Diamond. True or false? Okay? Because that's their opinion, not yours. But if you accept their opinion, then it becomes yours, and you will never be what you could be. If I would have accepted the fact that Mary said I was absolutely out of my flippin' mind for wanting to run a dog sled, I would have never been in a race. She has a right to her opinion. But it doesn't have to become me. All right? And that's the challenge between a husband and wife, is you want to please your spouse, you want them to be happy with you, but folks, if you love that person and that person loves you, they have a right to express their opinion, but they don't have a right to take it away from you. Okay? And so, when I shared with Mary, I really want to do this, because I may not get to do it again. I don't know what's going to happen with what's going on with my life right now, health-wise. We don't know when the master is going to make the call. And I've lived my life to where I've said many times, and Mary gets upset with me, I could go any day and I have no regrets. Because I have lived my life full. And I've done more than most. And I live every day since 1973, after that accident, I made a commitment to me that if I ever walked again, if I lived beyond that, I would live every day as though it was my last day. But I'd also live every day expecting many more. And I've done that, and I have fulfilled every wish and every dream I've ever had, and I'm so excited about it because I got to dream all over again. Okay? And you folks do the same thing. Just keep dreaming. Don't let anybody tell you you can't become what you want to become, or you can't have or accomplish what you want. The only person that's going to stop you is you. Okay? The top picture, John Noel, my partner, and there's his son now to the right. He was only 6 months old when I met him. He's 27 now. Just amazing. And managing, he's taken over for his dad. There, I'm in the background distilling lavender in the bottom picture. This old distillery that's down here, well, in fact, both of these are distilleries I learned on in France back in the early 90s, and now both of those are at the museum in Mona. And yes, I've traveled the world to learn from the best. Mr. View is my greatest teacher. And he's the one that said to me in 1992, he says, Mr. Getty, if you don't grow the plants yourself, the day will come when you will not have the oil. If you want pure oil, you won't have it. And folks, the day came 6 years ago. If we hadn't had the lavender in Mona, we would have been out of lavender that year. Okay? If we hadn't had the farms in France, we would not have had lavender from that day forward. We are now farming 3,500 acres of lavender in France and growing it every year. I calculated by the year of 2022, we're going to need over 40,000 acres of lavender to supply you people who are addicted to it. Okay? Yes, we're just getting started. We talked yesterday, Jared. We talked yesterday about the oil situation. And I have two beautiful ladies that just joined us here a few minutes ago. I've known these ladies, I was going to say 100 years, but no, it hasn't been. But we've been through some journeys, and it's been a beautiful experience. Primrose, will you and Alice sing? These two ladies I've known since 1995, and they helped me get started with supplying oils and sourcing oils, and they've been a supply and source for us ever since. And we've just been really proud. I'm going to drop the ball here while I've got all of you to protect me. Primrose, we need 10,000 kilos of myrtle for
Just like that. Just like that.
Yes. So it's just beautiful to see the growth, and we got to keep farming. And Young Living this month closes on another 12,500 acres of land. We've already broken a lot of the ground, we're ready for spring planting, and we just keep growing, and we will forever. But this is the thing that I want you folks to take home with you. That it doesn't matter what all the naysayers out there say about you and Young Living and your oils. You can just, okay? Or tell them, I made the commitment years ago. And I don't know why, to this day, that God gave me this mantle. Because I didn't go looking for it. And I didn't ask for it. It just happened. But I promised him, before I learned about essential oil, that if he would give me back my legs, I would serve his children the rest of my life. And I tell you this, I will never compromise an oil for nothing. There isn't enough money in this world for me to compromise. Okay? And it's not always easy. And Jared, we talked about it yesterday. 3 years ago, I rejected the only helichrysum that we could get our hands on because it didn't meet my nose standards. See, people have a GC standard. I have an NS standard. Nose standard. Okay? And I rejected it, and that rejection cost the company over $4 million in lost revenue because I said no to it. And I've said no. Mary's been with me long enough to know I've rejected oils over the years, over and over and over, because they didn't meet my standard. All right? I will always be the guard at the gate. And I'm training great people, Mike and Richard, in our laboratory. And I'm going to take Primrose and Alice through our lab today. I want them to see, because they knew me when I couldn't pay the bill. And she trusted me. There were Primrose would ship oils to me, knowing that I couldn't pay, because she believed it. That's the relationship. That's trust. And that you take with you forever. And so I'm proud, I'm excited to share my laboratory with them now, to see because they knew me when I had nothing but dirt on my boots. To see what we've grown, what we've become. But this, we have never changed, and that is our standard and our level of excellence for you. And people will continue forever to attack Young Living because they can never meet our standard. They can never rise to our level. And that's why we don't have to even discuss it with them. We don't have to discuss it with anybody. If somebody comes up and says, oh, your oil stinks, and that so-so oil smells sweeter. Hey, great, enjoy it while you're dying. Yeah, a lady just a few months ago, and she said, oh, I was in Young Living, but I switched to this other company because their oil smelled better. And I said, yeah, you know, synthetic perfumes do smell better to people who are toxic. And that's why it does smell better, because if they're toxic, they like the perfume. A pure body doesn't like toxic material. All right? If you people are pure, you wouldn't be sitting here. And you need to own that. You need to be proud of that. And don't let anybody step on your ideals and your dreams because they say, we've got something better. Bull, I won't say it. I know what we have. They don't even know what they have because they haven't paid the dues to go and live and learn and study and research and prove. I didn't just go buy oils from a broker in New Jersey. I went and sourced the oils myself. For years, Mary can tell you how many weeks I'd be gone from home, traveling the world and looking for pure oil. I can't tell you how many times I was in Egypt, in Fayum, and I had brokers hand me oils across the desk, and they'd stick the little sniffing wick in the oil and hand it across the table to me, and I'd smell it, and I'd sit there trying to think how I could insult them without insulting them. Because they were trying to sell me an oil that was cut, or an oil that was adulterated, or an oil that wasn't what I wanted. But because I'd taken the time to start training my nose, I could tell it. And maybe it was a gift too, I don't know. But that's how I was able to separate the garbage from the pure oil. I didn't go and wait for somebody. I went to the country, I went to the field, I walked the fields in Fayum, in Egypt, in Sri Lanka, in India. It doesn't matter where it's at, I've been there and I've walked the fields and I've talked to the people. I wanted to know, I wanted to learn, I wanted to educate myself. That's why I went to France in 1985. And you know what was really interesting, because I met a lady by the name of Valerie Wardwood in 1992 or 1993. She wrote a book, A to Z, Essential Oils. She was the guru, knew everything about essential oils. I called her up one day and I said, I'm going to Egypt to study. I said, how many times have you been there? She said, well, I've never been to Egypt. But she'd written a book about essential oils. She'd never been to Egypt, she'd never been to Sri Lanka, she'd never been to India. She'd never been to any of these places. And you know what? She'd never even been to the lavender fields in France, and she lived in London. But she wrote a book. Well, you know, it's paying the dues. It's paying the dues for what you do. That man right up there, Rodwin Farag, from Cairo University, where I went and studied with him for 4 years, biochemistry and essential oils. I was in Cairo when they blew the 3 buses at Ramses Square and killed 116 tourists in 1991. I was there. I just got out of the taxi to go into the museum. When the buses pulled up and the taxi driver said to me, he says, if you're going into the museum to spend some time, he said, wait till the tourists leave. He said, you'll enjoy it better. So I turned and walked across the intersection, was going to go over to the American University and just do some research in the library when the bomb went off. And I dove down behind a wall that jutted out from the building, a cement brick wall. I dove down behind it and sit there like this because the military come in, machine gun fire, glass was shattering, bricks were shattering, and I'm trying to keep from getting hit. And a foot in a shoe landed 3 feet from me in the street. I was in this temple, and I took the video footage back to Mr. Frog, Dr. Farag. I showed it to him and he yelled at me.
Gary, how do you do this? You can't go. That's sacred room. That's sacred room. I'm Egyptian. I'm professor. I can't even go in that room. How do you get in that room? Yes, how I've got there. Places I've been, things I've seen. I found the ancient distillery in Engedi. Yeah, there it is on the far bottom right there, in that sacred room. And 4 years later, I took Mary back, and that gardener took me up there, recognized me, and he took Mary and I up to that room so she could see it, so she didn't think I was making up stories. Yeah. Mary, who found that distillery? In Taxila, Pakistan. It was a legend. They said it never existed, and I found it in Taxila, Pakistan. The distillery vats in Masada. And I talked to Mr. Hussein, the professor of archaeology at the Hebrew University. I said, this is not a workshop, this is an old distillery. So they asked me to draw it up for them, so I did. There's my first distillery. 2 pressure cookers welded together. There's a drawing that I made on the airplane of my next distillery. There's my second distillery. I took the first one and I enlarged it so I could do more volume because you guys were demanding so much. So I added 2 more cookers to it to increase the volume, and it wasn't enough. So I designed the third one. I broke the ground in St. Mary's. And there's the most famous distillery yet, right there in the bottom right. That picture was taken on the Steven Seagal movie set, The Patriot. I wrote 17 pages of script for that movie and helped coach him through some of the things with the oils, and he portrayed the part of being a doctor using the essential oils for treating his patients. There's my first irrigation system made out of PVC pipe because I didn't have any money. I sold my pickup truck to buy the steel to build the first stainless steel distillery, and there I am right there in the garage. I cleared the land with a tractor because I didn't have a bulldozer then. I cut the trees and skidded them in with my tractor from the bush back there to build the first stainless steel distillery in North America. And there I'm setting in place the first steam. Mary came to visit in 1994. That's her standing down there looking at it and saying, wow, this is ugly. My first cook coming out of the cooker. I didn't have the money to buy an overhead hoist, so I lifted the basket out with the front end loader of the tractor. And when I bought that tractor, I borrowed the money from my mother to buy that tractor because I was broke after building the distillery. No, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth and a gold one up my backside. There's my Uncle Jack that came to help me because he was a builder, a fabricator. And this was the day we fired it in our first steam, and they said they heard me scream in Salt Lake. And I'll tell you, to this day, when I distill a new oil, it feels just like that day. It's just as exciting. Mary said, honey, you need to paint it. You need to dress it up. And I said, it ain't going to make a difference. So she went to town and bought the paint, and she painted it. And it didn't produce one more drop of oil. That's me up there, welding and building the first mechanical lavender harvester for St. Mary's. And then this one down here I imported from France. That's my first mechanical planter right there on the far right. Mary's sitting there. That's when I finally got a little heart throbbing into my chest for Mary. She came up when we were celebrating the distillery, and I was working on the distillery. My aunt called us for lunch, and I went up to the house, and I said, well, where's the crew? And she said, they must still be out in the field. She says, Gary, you want to go out and bring them in for lunch? And I said, sure. And so I drove out, and I'm looking for Mary, and my aunt said, well, I haven't seen her since this morning. And I go out, and Monty's coming across the field with the tractor, and I stop him, and I says, anybody seen Mary? And he nods his head like that. I walk around the tractor, and all I could see was the whites of her eyes through that layer of savvy minerals.
We didn't have a name for it then. We called it field dust. So here's this beautiful woman I've never seen out of beautiful gowns and gloves on stage, sitting on that planter behind my tractor.
Is that the same field she
But
proposed to you in?
No, that's not the same one, but I still never proposed. You're right, Gary. And we won't take time for that story, but if you want to know the truth, don't ask Mary. And then this was tansy, when we were wildcrafting tansy along the rivers. And Mary, one of her favorite things was running the swather. I originally started cutting tansy with a weed eater and pitchforking it in the truck and hauling it to the distillery. And that's our second convention, 1994, in St. Mary's, and we're distilling tansy right there. And it was the biggest convention in history, 241 people. The gate into the ranch at Young Living, and then the day I replaced the old boiler with a new one, and then started building because now the demand is growing, and my logs were replaced with cement and steel, and there's the distillery there in the top left now how it looks. There's Joseph sitting on my shoulder, the jacuzzi, because we pipe our floral water into the jacuzzis and people soak in it. It's just an amazing experience. I started experimenting with the ground, the nutrients for the plants, and to see how we could grow them. The plant number E on the far right is when I developed that fertility program that we're still using today. Because if you want good oil, you've got to have roots that go deep in the soil. And then St. Mary's, the growth there, it's just gone on and on. There's Jacob in the field with me, harvesting Melissa. First we harvested it by hand, and then we moved up to a swather. 18 distributors helping us to harvest Melissa, and it would take us 18 days, and I'd start losing my Melissa because the window was too long. And so I went to work, and I invented the one on the top far right. So here on the left is 18 people harvesting Melissa. I built that harvester, and it took 4 to harvest it in 4 days. Melissa cannot touch the dirt, and that's why we did it this way, dragging the tarps under the swather, so the Melissa didn't touch the dirt. Melissa is the most feminine plant in all the aromatic kingdom. And she does not like to get dirty. And she doesn't like men coming in the field before she puts her makeup on in the morning either. Okay? So she likes to be shiny and pristine when the men go in the field. So Melissa, you have to coddle her. She's a true Melissa. Oh, here I'm studying with GC. Casablanca, who I've studied with now for 26 years, Dr. Hans Bashir. I went to Turkey, and I spent 121 class hours in GC mass spectrometry. Why? Because I didn't want somebody telling me, here's a GC, see how good it is? I wanted to know. It wasn't good enough for me to have people tell me, I wanted to know. And so I went and learned. And I learned with the best. There's Sue Chow on the bottom, who I took to France and had Dr. Casablanca train her. And as we build up the lab at home, there's our farm in France. There's a field, that's not our field, you can tell, okay? Now, you look at this field over on the right here, you look at the left side, you look at the right side. The left side is St. Mary's lavender returned to France after 20 years. The lavender on the far left is French lavender. The lavender died out in France, and I told them this 25, 27 years ago. I said, you will see the day when we will save your lavender. And we returned the seed back to France 6 years ago, and now it's St. Mary's lavender that is producing the lavender for France today. There's my first mechanical harvester in France that I bought for our farm there. There's my partners, Jean-Noel, Benoit, and Jean-Marie, so my field manager. We put last year the first irrigation system in Provence to irrigate lavender because it's just getting so dry. We're losing the lavender. And so we put in the first irrigation system that France has ever had in the world of lavender, and it's just been an amazing outcome. We stepped up, made these new tubs. We went to the chambers. They're all stainless steel lined. And it's just been amazing. Here's when we started Young Living in Utah. And I'm sure I must be run over my time. Huh? Okay, so I stop? Huh? I don't want to take everybody's time. I didn't come here for that. I come to listen to my son sing. Okay, a little bit, please just tell me, okay? Okay. So, this is when we moved out of, I have to back up because this was pretty funny. I'm doing the remodeling. There's Mary's sister, Aline, in the middle picture. Mary and Aline on their knees. You know, they photoshopped me out of the picture. They were kneeling to me. You know. But there's our supply. There's our supply. Lauren, there's our supply in 1994. Yes, we need to, these folks need to see that. So, yeah, it was exciting. There I'm studying oils. Mary's there, she's negotiating with Primrose on the phone, you know. Golly, maybe next week we can send you the payment. And that little picture there to the left of Mary is what the building looked like when I rented it. In fact, I have to tell you this, I saw it in the middle of the night with a flashlight, and when I took Mary there the next day, she said, "You are not serious, are you?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" And she said, "Look at this pigsty." I said, "It won't look that way in a few weeks." And so I went to work. But I bought that place for $189,000. We sold it for a little over $1 million a few years later. Because nobody wanted. And then we bought the building up there on the top right. We're expanding and putting in the loading docks, moved. And now we're really up in big time. We're going to electric mixers instead of hand mixers. Our call center, then the farm, the greenhouses. Just here I was building my 6-row planter right here. This was an amazing step up from the planter I built in St. Mary's. I went to a farm auction to buy used equipment because I could fix it. I couldn't afford to buy a new tractor, a new swather. I had to put money into the products and into the oils and the inventory to supply all of you that weren't there. But I knew you were coming. That's what it was all about. I knew you were coming. And I started building the distillery, the air seeder that went in. I put in 18 miles of underground pipe system in the farm in Mona for irrigation. The first distillery and the first cook in Mona in 1996. And then 97. In 1 year, look at it, they went from this in 96 to that 1 year later. And that's all peppermint on the deck there. See, Lauren, I knew what I was doing. Yeah, the visitor center, started building the farm office, the equipment shop. And now we finally got up to buying a new used tractor. The lavender harvester on the top and the bottom, I both imported from France. And Young Living's lavender in Mona. Now this harvester, again, this was not imported. I designed and built this lavender harvester. We have 3 of them now. And I built another harvester, and now we're in production. I redesigned, and we're looking now to start building another harvester. Mary loves swathing. That's Hollywood Mary. She loved running the swather. And that's my peppermint. I took an old hay baler because we had too much peppermint to harvest. I couldn't pitchfork it in the trucks anymore. So I took an old hay baler and cut the back off and built an elevator and pulled it and loaded the trucks with peppermint. Marcel Espio and his wife came to see me in 2002 because Marcel used to laugh at me back in 90, 91 and say, you Americans can never do what we do. He stood there on the platform at convention and paid me the greatest tribute I've ever had. And the student has now become a teacher. Oh, here's our tub grinder grinding juniper. How many of you like juniper oil? Yes. Our chamomile. Clary sage. You know, Jared, I think I need to ask this question, and you might want to get a pencil and paper out. I just had an idea, we may save ourselves a lot. So what I'd like to do is ask this group, which oils can we quit selling? So we don't have to spend time sourcing. Can we take Myrtle away? No. Because it's really difficult right now. No? Lemon? No. You've all had lavender for so long. Aren't you tired of it? No? You still want lavender? You wore it out. No?
They don't like sandalwood anymore.
Oh, so, okay. So we put sandalwood on the list? We can discontinue sandalwood? Just give me one I can discontinue. Well, let's start with blends then. The tours on the farm, and of course, we didn't have a picture here, but in the early days when I started Mona, I cultivated the plants. Mary can tell you, with a 4-horse team. And did that for years. And so I grew up with horses. Nancy knows. Her and I farmed with horses. Dad wouldn't let us drive the tractor. And so I wanted to reach out to more people. So that's why I started the show horses. I wanted to expose young living in a bigger way. And these are just all the fun things we do. Jousting, that kind of, I still love doing it, even though I have to leave Mary at home now. And now my dancing Frisians, Jacob and Joseph have taken it up, and this year at our draft horse show, Jacob became the defending champion for light armor jousting. Our horse show, this year we had our third annual horse show. Third annual horse show. It was huge. Oils in the form, I'm not going to take time there, but this is basil, palo santo, and tansy that I use here for fumigating the white flies in Ecuador. That's where I learned that. Ninja red. Yes, I go to the source in the province of Ninja and pick the wolfberries myself. I made the first wolfberry crisp bar. Right there. I made the first wolfberry crisp bar. How many ate that one? All 3 of you. You know, that was the best wolfberry crisp bar. I have to tell you a little story about it. I was so proud of that wolfberry crisp bar. I loved it. And we packaged it and we shipped it out. And people, distributors, how many of you can remember back in those days, 94? None of you were here then. Yes, Maria, you remember. Thank you. It was so exciting. I was so excited. I got a phone call one day and said, Gary, yes, I just opened my wolfberry crisp bar and there's some green stuff on it. I said, don't tell everybody. They'll all want it. It was growing extra protein in the form of algae. So back to the drawing board. But oh my goodness. Yes, then the einkorn. There's einkorn at Mona. Thrashing it with the steam thrashing machine. Now we moved the whole einkorn project to the new ranch in Tabiona. Cutting with horses, and that's how I grew up. Nancy and I used to walk behind my dad and shock the einkorn when we were little. Then I got old enough to drive the team. And one day I was making fun of Nancy and my younger brother because they were walking behind shocking it, and my dad caught me making fun of them. Guess who wound up walking behind the binder shocking it after that? With my backside blistered where I didn't say nothing for 3 days. Didn't make fun of my siblings after that. That top picture was taken just after I started building the distillery in Ecuador. It was nothing but a jungle. And how many of you were there last week or 2 weeks ago? Hold up your hands. How many have been there? Looks a little different now, doesn't it? It's a beautiful paradise. And this is when I built the dam where the restaurant is at. I had to build 2.5 miles of road to get into it. I'd walk Mary out through the jungle to this land before I bought it, after I'd made my commitments and decided to do it. We were in the paperwork. And I walked her up on a hill where we could overlook the rolling hills of the jungle. And I'm standing there and I'm saying, honey, what do you think? Look, isn't it beautiful? And she's not saying anything. And I turned around and looked at her, and there was tears coming off her face. And I said, what's wrong? And she said, where are you going to farm? I said, honey, don't worry about it. You take care of the kids in school, I'll take care of the farm. And so that's what I took on. And it's the most beautiful paradise in the world today. I started building the distillery. There's the water coming up the dam. There's Mary's house over there on the far side. We had to build the boiler from scratch because I could not buy a boiler in Ecuador. So building the boiler, build my chambers, the cooking chambers. I shipped the steel down. In fact, that's a container with the root rake off my D8 in St. Mary's that I shipped to Ecuador with the stainless steel to build the distillery. And the framework goes up. And then the monsoons came. This was a really amazing time. I was at the clinic, I drove out, the rains were coming, and I wanted to go check on my crew, and I got to here and couldn't get across. And my crew was on the other side, and they were screaming and yelling. I couldn't figure out why they were screaming and yelling. I walked through that water over 200 feet to get across to where my crew was, and I had them hooked hands, and I walked them back through that raging river that had gone over the road and got them to safety on the other side, and they were yelling and yelling. I finally understood that there was one of the farm workers had got swept with the river down into the brush in the river. And I went back and found him and pulled him out of the river and brought him back. When I got back to the truck, the guys were standing there and they were crying. Did I lose somebody? Am I missing something? And I'm trying to figure out what's wrong, and my Spanish is not all that great. And finally, in Quebec, they were crying because they couldn't believe Dr. Young walked back and rescued their friend out of the river. The doctor doesn't mean jack squat to anybody. It's what's in here. It's what you care about. That's all that matters. That was the dam, 155-acre dam, and it washed out through that monsoon. It gutted our roads. It was starting over. Look at that's Jacob.
Oh.
Hard to believe after seeing him today. But he sure knew even back then where to put his hands. That's the only reason that truck got out of there. Yeah, and that's Sabina to the left side there. Yeah, and yeah, anyway, it was great. So there I'm on the far right, smelling another plant that I discovered. And my first distillery in Guayaquil. This was before I got the ranch built. I set up these little distilleries and was distilling the first Ruta, the first Palo Santa. This was our Ruta farmers up in Ambato that was growing Ruta and still do today. Part of the employee housing. This trip I made, altogether I've made 9 expeditions into the jungle in Ecuador looking for plants. On this trip, in fact, the skyline back there where those mountains are, that's where we'd walk to, and we're coming back out. And I stopped here to take a breather, and Andres, who was my interpreter, took that picture. And I'm standing there, and Andreas, I must be getting old. I got more wind than I can blow. And I thought, geez, Gary, you're getting out of shape. I get back to the airport, they told me to put my backpack on the scale, and it weighed 92 pounds. Maybe I'm not that bad after all. But all these other 3 pictures were with shamans in the jungle gathering plants. Down here, I asked that. He was the chief of a village in the bottom right. I asked him, I said, could you make a fire and we'll make lunch? And he said, it's too wet. He said, we can't make a fire, it's too wet. I went, oh, crying out loud. So I made the fire, and after the fire was going, then he said, you burn your jungle down, you burn your jungle down. But then he ate all the chicken dogs. Here was kids in the river. This trip in the bottom left corner is when I was going upriver at the 4 corners of Brazil, Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador, where I got bit the night after this. Mary's 2 houses, her first one or second one. Dorado Azul there, isn't that beautiful? Yeah. And you know how I found Dorado Azul? I was walking looking for land, and I'm walking through this brush in the jungle. If I was a dog, they'd call me a bloodhound. And I smelled it, so I went back and started rubbing the plants, trying to find out where the smell was coming from, and I found it in the jungle. I gathered the seeds and planted them at the farm, and that's how it evolved. There's Jacob and Joseph in training, the distillery going up. Oh, this was amazing here. See that right in the center, the coils, the pipes, the copper pipes? Well, what I didn't know, I'd never distilled below the equator at sea level before. I didn't know that ground temperature stayed at 80 degrees. I couldn't get water cold enough for my condensers. And I couldn't get the oil to separate because the water wasn't cold enough to separate it. And so I started looking, I called Mark. I said, Mark, I said, I can't get a separation. My water is too hot. And so I built a big cistern. I put a manifold in it so the water would spray down through the cistern. I put it under 3 feet of dirt. I put fans in it and blew air on the water to spray it out of the manifold. And I was able to get the temperature from 82 degrees down to 64 degrees. But I couldn't do enough volume to feed all of my condensers doing that. So I called Mark and I called Steve, another engineer that worked at Young Living then. Steve Pitcher, some of you might remember him. He's making diffusers for us now. And they said, well, Gary, you're going to have to go on the heat exchanger. I said, well, get one on a ship and get it here for me immediately. And he said, Gary, you're going to have a heat exchanger for each condenser. And I said, I don't care. Just get them on the boat and get them down here. We're in production. I got to have separators. I got to have coolers. And they said, well, Gary, he said, you're going to have to okay it because they're $250,000 a piece. And I said, don't worry about it. We'll just pass it on to the distributor. They can handle it. No, I didn't. I went back to work. And here's what I'm going to tell you a little secret. When you have a problem and you don't know how to solve it, you take a little 3x5 notepad or whatever, it doesn't matter the size, and put it on your nightstand, put your pen there, and you go to bed. And you tell your spouse to stay on their side of the bed that night. All right? This is not a time for romance. This is time for getting serious. All right? And then when everything's quiet and your spouse is snoring away, then you start talking to Father. And you tell him what you need. Because he has all the answers. What the heck do we need to go to the university for? Just have to tap into the real source. Then we go to the university to second it. Okay? And so I just told him my dilemma and the problem I was having. 2 hours later, he woke me up with the full schematic. Go get a deep freeze and build coils in it. And put a manifold on each end. And put half antifreeze and half water. Turn the deep freeze down to 28 degrees Fahrenheit. I built it exactly as he told me. We're still using them today. The deep freeze, all the copper coils, all of the manifolds at both ends, cost me $5 grand a piece, and you can see the 3 of them sitting back there. Took my water temperature to 48 degrees. Still in use today. We never raised your costs one bit. Right? Ylang-ylang. We now have 65,000 ylang-ylang trees, and it's only now producing 1/3 of the oil that Young Living needs. When I did this, it produced all the ylang-ylang we needed. Not today. Look at that. Look at the flowers. Isn't that amazing? How many of you have been in Ecuador and looked at the ylang-ylang forest? The love farm is what our workers call it. The restaurant is built on top of the lake. You know, the oregano, the worm farm. The biggest problem I had was immigrating them from California to Ecuador. Six worm houses, it's all organic. And why? So we pipe the liquid into that cistern right there, and then it goes in and marries with the cistern with the liquid that comes off our compost pile, and that goes through the irrigation system. And then we take the castings off the worm house, there are 6 of those big worm houses, and we mix it with the goat manure, and that goes out on the fields as well. So all organic. Our research center, our weather station, so we can track it. And I've put together a system where I analyze the bricks with the barometric pressures, the temperatures, the soil condition, everything, to identify when is the best time to harvest, how long do we lay the plant down before we harvest, is it sun-dried, is it shade-dry, do we cut in the afternoon, do we cut in the morning, what's the best time to harvest, and there's times we can't pick a best time, we have to pick a window because there's too much to harvest, and if we don't harvest, we'll lose it because aromatic plants only have a window of time. And you've got to know where that window of time is. No one had ever distilled in Ecuador before I went there, and I went to the library and I could not find a book on distillation of Ecuador. So I had to write the book. There's the floor that we lay our plants on that have to be shade dried. And here we're unloading lemongrass from the farm. There's an aerial view of the first reservoir I built and the second reservoir. I built 5 reservoirs on that farm. There's my GC mass spec. I did something with this GC that's never been done before, and Primrose, this will tickle you. I called Algin. I told them I needed to be able to have a GC with the MS, but I need to be able to split it. And they said it can't be done. I said, it's got to be done. So I found an engineer. We built an injection splitter, and we run 3 columns in that GC. And one goes to the MS for the 50 meter, there's a 60 meter column. So we have one that runs in the GC and 2 that runs through the MS. And I call it my poor man GCMS. There's a tree house. There's the little cafeteria that supplies the food to the patients at the spa. And this is the school that existed when I moved there. No windows, no water, no electricity. I put the first electric line in there so they could have Christmas that Christmas. And that's me being Santa Claus for the kids. And it was just pathetic. At first I thought the kids were just playing at that abandoned building until I realized that was their school. I stopped one day following a truck back out, and the dust was going through the holes on the wall on this side and going out. And I walked up to it, and the kids were coughing and choking. I drove to the house. This is before we built on the ranch. I was just building the place. And I said, Mary, we got to build a school for the kids. And she said, with all you've got on your plate, when are you going to have time? I said, you come with me. I drove her back to the school, and a car just gone ahead of us, and the dust was going through just like it did with the truck. Mary got out. We walked up to school. She heard the kids. We looked in the windows there. She saw them, and she turned around, smacked me on the chest. She said, well, what are you waiting on? So I went to work looking for ground, and nobody wanted to sell us any ground, but I found this swamp that was under 2.5 feet of water. I drew the blueprints myself, hired an architect to stamp them, and built the school. But first I hauled in 350-some semi-loads of rock and beat into that swamp after I took the excavator in there and dug it and drained it out the best I could. And then we beat 350 semi-loads of rock into that swamp and built that 2-story school on it. It hasn't moved 1/4 of an inch. And there the kids go to the farm weekly to take classes in agriculture. They learn about manufacturing bricks. I brought this equipment from Johannesburg, South Africa, that makes bricks out of 95% dirt, 5% cement. And we build everything with our own bricks now. And that's what I shipped to Nepal, that we're building Nepal with. This is scouting in Oman. Distillery in France. There's at the distillery in France, or not France, in Spain. Should we tell them, Jared?
Yes.
You'd be the first.
Should we tell? Well, you want to know a secret?
Yes.
How many are diamonds? Okay. How many of you want to be diamonds? All right. And I'm going to make you a promise. If you become a diamond next year, I will take you to Spain to see frankincense and cissus distillation. Now, how many are going to be diamonds for this trip? All right, 219. So you've got plenty of time to do it. There's my first cookers in Oman. Now we have 7 of them. I was in Ubar in 1995, studying the history of frankincense. Here I'm meeting with the Sultanate of the territory of Dhofar in the bottom right. He had a bad migraine. I treated him with oils. He was just absolutely stunned. The Snake Monument, right here on the left bottom corner. It was a legend. The Minister of Antiquities, the Minister of History, the Ministry of Museums told John Wett and I, this was a legend that never existed, and I found it in the desert. It's ours at the farm. The distributor is under the oldest frankincense tree known in the world today, which is over 850 years old. Francis Fuller planting frankincense at the farm. The distributors at Fort Sumhatum. There's Mary. And this is another find that I made in 2010, I believe it was. I spent 16 years following this legend, and again was told by everyone it was a legend that never existed. And I found it on top of a mountain. You can drive right down the valley and you cannot see it. You can walk within 40 feet of it on the bottom of the mountain and you can't see it. It's just right up on top of a plateau. And when I got there, I just had a gut feeling, climb the mountain, climb the mountain. And I climbed the mountain, there it was. 8 extraction chambers for frankincense, over 4,000 years old. In the Socotra, the island of Socotra. I was the first human to go into the forbidden zone in Yemen, into the ancient city of Shabwa, the first to ever video record Shabwa. And the man that was assigned to me by the government to be my interpreter, they wouldn't let him go in there with me. They signed the troops with me, and he was so mad. He says, I'm Yemeni. I can't go. Why do you get to go? I was walking, the top one is when I walked the frankincense trail from Oman to Yemen, because I wanted to document where it really existed, not all of this stuff that they've published in books that aren't even remotely close to it. I wanted to know. I have walked and driven the entire frankincense trail from Fort Sumharam to Jerusalem. And it took years to do that. That's the ancient city of Shabwa. That old incense burner. I think there's a better picture, maybe not. No. I dug down beside the treasury house 3 feet and found that stone incense burner. And the Minister of Antiquity, because it was supposed to give everything to them, and I took it to him, and he gave it back to me. He said, Mr. Young, this belongs to you. And it's mine. It's on my desk. So, but that was at the great gate where standing on the far right, where the camel caravans would come in, and they'd have to pay 25% duty or lose their right hand. So then I wrote the story to create the film, The One Gift, and wrote the book, and that's how all that evolved. Here's 110 of you distributors that played a part in that movie project. And I'm going to tell you this, I just gave commission a couple of weeks ago to our filming department. Take it out of the archives, and we're going to reproduce it and make it available for you. Okay? This was a little bit of a scary experience. I went into Somalia. There's my copy of my passport, my visa, my airline ticket. So it's documented I was really there. This plane that I flew in had bullet holes. They patched with silicone that had been shot at. And it was a little nervous when I got on that plane in Irrigation and they taxied out on the runway. And every part of that plane, including me, was shaking. And I had, there's no way this plane's going to make it to Bosaso. But I got to Bosaso, I went and visited the schools, I went to the stores, I bought pencils and notebooks and just had fun for 4 days, going to schools, 2 or 3 schools every day, giving the children pencils and books because they never had any. Oh. And this is on my journey into Timorishi, the village, to go study the Feriana and Cartery. It was great. It was a celebration when I got there. It was just a great time. Here we have a Feriana and a Cartery tree on that top picture growing side by side with the Feriana on the right. Here's a Cartery. I climbed up in the tree to get some real close-ups of it. But you see the Feriana attaches to the limestone and just grows right out of the limestone. And it tastes good to chew it. So there's Boswellia sacra, Cartery, and Feriana, the GCs on them, the different resins and gums, the different trees there. It was just a tremendous experience while I was there learning all about that. There was 2 attempts on my life for kidnapping, one in Bosaso, one in Irrigation. And Bosaso was at the airport. The terrorist group came in and tried to kidnap me, and the soldiers, they had a shootout. There was one that was killed, one that was wounded. I managed to get on the plane unscathed and got to Irrigation, and they tried to kidnap me in Irrigation. So, you know, when it's meant to happen, it's meant to happen. This was the early days when I started harvesting at Highland. That was our camp. We'd sit there to eat when it was 20 below, and then I put the tents up and made the camp and started bringing the distributors. There's Anna Maya and Catherine there with their hands in the air. They became my first cooks at the camp. And my little chippers, and then I started building the Taj Mahal in the bottom right. How many have been to Highland for the harbor? What a great experience. And there it is in the bottom right there. I'm teaching after a day's harvest and waiting for dinner. Marcy King, who just retired a couple of years ago, has been with me for many years. There's my old days of hauling logs and running the highway in Alaska. This picture down here in the bottom was on the pipeline. Actually, Jesse, you might recognize that. Well, it's not very good, but that picture where I'm loading trailer on top of a trailer, that was just taken north of Coldfoot. Up there, I'm offloading a crane at Adigan Camp. Picture there at the Arctic Circle. I braved it, take off my coat at 20-some below zero. Oh, this was an off-highway logging truck I was driving before my accident in northern Canada. This is when I was hauling on the pipeline, crossing the river, the Yukon River on the hovercrafts. The old sourdough truck stop, fixing chains. And so that's how I know how to do all this stuff. That's my semi. My trailers, two 38-foot trailers, gross 144,000 pounds. That's the conveyors I built for moving the chips out. And here's our GCs, one of them at St. Mary's, the building of the Highland Distillery. And here I'm setting the beam up, and I had to have the loader put it on the back of my forklift and hold me down because the beam was so heavy it was tipping me over. And everybody, see the guy leaving right there in the bottom corner? Everybody left the distillery as I started hoisting that beam up into place. That was kind of funny. And then I set the cooker in. You know, I see a diamond face right in the middle of that picture in the top right there. I believe Sabina and Jeff were there. There's the Highland Distillery. A load that came apart before it got out. Another group of distributors at Highland. And this is when I started automating the distilleries, and we're still working on it. That's been really a beautiful experience, a beautiful blue spruce. Incidentally, I can share something else with you. Right now, today, the University of Utah is studying blue spruce. And we will should have the report, as we were told yesterday, sometime next week. Here's skidding timber. I grew up doing this with my father and my sister Nance. This is not something that I just decided to do out of a whim like dog sled racing. I grew up doing this. It was just like riding a bicycle. You never forget. There's Mary and the boys with me. And this is one of my favorite things. Anything to do with horses. There's our lab. The distributors up there hauling limbs to the distillery. Here's the Reforestation Project, planting. There's transporting in my Conquest oils back from Highland to Mona, because we had to get them back because there was somebody wanting them. Can you imagine that? Northern Lights. This was an amazing project. We worked through the winter down to 55 below zero, and we only took 1 day off at 55 below because it was too hard when we started up the next day, so we just worked through it. Here's an aerial view showing the outline of the ranch there and the site that I cleared and started building the distillery from scratch, clearing the land, putting in the road, digging the footings. There's Chip Cowie, Scott Schuler, Jim Powell that came up to help us, pouring the footings in September. This is not intelligent to start building a mammoth project in the northern country of British Columbia in September. Trust me. Oh, I shipped up distilleries from Utah so we could expedite the project. Over on the far left, I'm excavating to make a cistern to hold the water from the condensers. And we're building right through the winter, the snow. That was my accident. I was hauling dirt to build the road ramp into the distillery. And it was 35 below zero. I just loaded the end dump, and I backed up to unload. It was pitch black at night because it's black up there most of the time. And I raised it up, and I'm looking in the mirror at the lights, and I'm not seeing the load coming out. And did my gate not open? So I jumped out and I run back to check the gate, and the gate was open. The load had frozen in the bed. Just from the time I loaded till I got to the dump site. I ran back to trip it, and just as I was coming by, the hydraulic ram snapped. And just, amazing how God works. Just as it snapped, I tripped over a frozen dirt clod and fell, and the hydraulic ram that snapped in half came right down and landed 6 inches from my head. If I hadn't have tripped, it would have hit me and killed me dead. And so that was just some of the things that happens if we're putting beams up in the middle of the winter at 30, 40 below. Oops. And then, after we got our clothes in, I went to work harvesting. I'm on the feller buncher harvesting. Chip was on this. I shipped this shear up from Utah. It didn't work for us because there was just too much stuff on the ground, so I bought the feller buncher, and then I rented the forwarder so we could bring the timber out of the bush, and then started hauling the chips to the distillery, and we started distilling March the 9th, I believe was the date, 3 years ago, and now we're going full speed, black spruce. Croatia is our next project. Open up this operation, building the farm. I started building the distillery there, and nobody can believe this when I tell this story. I landed in Croatia on the 31st of May, and on June the 19th, from scratch, with nothing but 4 walls, we were distilling oil. And there's the boiler that I shipped up from the farm in France. There's Helichrysum we brought into the big warehouse and laid on the floor. That's Joseph there in the background. And there's my partner, Zoran, the manager of the offices there in operation. Dominic, my field manager. Part of my crew, there's a bunch of distributors that came from France and Zagreb, or Serbia, to see the distillation there as we're getting ready to go. There's the distillery for our Helichrysum, and what a wonderful experience. Thailand, our other distillery there. This is the other one that I mentioned. I found this in 1996 after spending years and years traveling Israel looking for it, and this was an amazing time. Vaughn has seen this building with us, been there. Yeah, it was. This is our frankincense growing and Commiphora gileadensis in our little farm project in Israel at Almud, and our first distillery in Israel. This is when I was teaching the folks in Madagascar distilling vetiver. It scared me to death when I got there because they had put a valve on the swan neck and just had a water seal lid that closed the swan neck. And I asked the lady, I said, "What are you doing?" And she said, "Well, I was told that I have to build pressure to extract the oil out of the vetiver." And I said, "Shut it down now." And I went over and started cranking the valve open. And she was yelling, and I didn't understand her language, and she was upset that I was opening the valve. And I kept telling her, I said, "You go shut the firebox boiler." I said, "Tell them to shut the steam off now." And I'm cranking as hard as I can, and I'm nervous, and geez, this thing's gonna blow up at any moment. Anyway, got it shut down and saved everything, and then I explained to her, and she just started shaking. And she realized that she had just created a bomb that could have had everybody killed. Oh, that was Madagascar. Here was our partner distiller in Nairobi, Lada. Our sandalwood operation in Hawaii, Melaleuca in Australia, our Kanaiza operation here on the bottom right in Quebec. This is France. This is Morocco, where the firebox is, where the blue tansy. This is in Ethiopia, the thrashing of grain. Ethiopia. No, this is Hunzaland, where I was at. This is where I found the einkorn seed in 1996. Okay, I think I better stop. I know we got to get a signal from Luba, but I'm kidding. Okay? Yes. I'm sorry.
one of a kind? It's most remarkable, and you just heard a most remarkable presentation from him. I mean, people would love, they would be thrilled to hear this, and it just doesn't happen. But I told Luba that we would like to have Jesse and Sherry come up after Gary because Gary's very connected to Jesse. And of course, we've been connected to Sherry for many years. But while they're coming up, as you know, Sherry is our royal crown. And she's someone who I remember back many years, we were at a horse show, I think it was. And they had a booth and she said, oh, I just don't know how to do this. I'm not like all the others. And look where she's come. And she's been through she's had so many accidents, so many broken bones, so many traumas, so much pain and misery. And I think that's why she and Gary connect so well, because she understands what Gary's going through. And she's been a wonderful help to me, to help me understand, and she certainly understands Gary, and she has blessed our lives immensely. She probably knows the products in Young Living better than any other member, because she's had to use so many for her own needs. And I just love to hear her talk about product. I love to hear her talk about the industry that she left, which was the beauty industry, in that she was the owner of a hair franchise, and she gave all of that up to build her business in Young Living. I remember very well when she was going through all of that. And it's really exciting to have Janet Becker here with us, because she's one of Sherry's closest friends, who's also a beautician. And she also walked away from it to build a Young Living business. And she's been at Sherry's side through all of Sherry's traumas, and we just appreciate being able to have that experience. Sherry loves horses, loves animals. She's done so much raindrop on horses, and she's been a great teacher at the farm, and she has taught so many people how to take care of their animals using the oils. And she's been a great instigator and a support and help with the animal conference that we have at the farm. It's kind of like it's been very near and dear to her heart. But she has given so much to Young Living, and we are so grateful for all that she does, because Gary can't do it all, and we need people like her in the industry that Gary loves so much. I should let Gary introduce Jesse to you, because he knows Jesse much better than I do. But Jesse, having run 59 year-olds, knows these dogs and knows what goes on. And Gary was so fascinated watching Jesse and her love of the animals and her exactness and her precision in doing everything that she did. And he said, Mary, I'm going to try to get Jesse to come to the farm and be with us. And he tried really hard. She turned him down. He kept at it. She turned him down. He kept at it. And finally she gave in. And she's at the farm in Tabiona, the ranch in Tabiona with the dogs. And she's helping him build out the big dog center there that absolutely is going to be a magnificent blessing to those who have dogs, who are mushers, who don't have a place, who love dogs but don't have a place to send injured dogs, and it's going to be a wonderful rehabilitation center. But why don't you two come up, because Sherry and Jesse they did a wonderful presentation together, but I'm sure Gary has more that he'd like to tell you.
Yeah, as they're coming up, I want you to know this. Jesse was the youngest musher to win the 500-mile Race to the Sky in Montana at the age of 17. So she started out young in life, and she's always grew up on a ranch with her parents and had dogs and loved them. She also was the first foreigner to win the I'm not going to say it right, the Odyssey race in France a number of years ago of over 500 miles. She has ran the Yukon Quest, numerous mid-distance races throughout Alaska, and continues to race today. And we connected because I bought some dogs in Alaska. I needed to transport them to Utah, and the lady I bought dogs from gave me Jesse's name and phone number and said, this lady transports dogs. And that's how we made the connection, and it's been history since. But it's like, you know, because of her background and my background, it's almost like we're brother and sister rather than friends. Because her upbringing and mine was very similar in a lot of ways, and our love for animals is probably equally the same. So it's been a great blessing to have her join the Young Living team and be part of Young Living and part of your lives as well. So I know you're going to appreciate hearing from Jessie, and I'm going to turn the time over to her and share it.